So my journey began. I didn't have a church, but I had a God who had a son who died for me, who shed his blood for me, who put everything on the line for me. I didn't know where we were going to go, but it's like, I've got faith in you. I've got faith in you. I could only imagine how you must have felt 2,000 years ago when people were spitting in your face, when people were mocking you and hitting you as you were dying. And as committed as I was to Lucifer, God, now I am your son's right hand. I will be his right hand. I'll be one of many of his right hand. I will shed my blood. I will die for him. I will be a martyr for him. You can mock me, spit in my face, but I will fight you back. And I'll do it with love if I have to. And that's when my wife came. And she was a Latter-day Saint. Meeting her, man. What a breath of fresh air she was. What a breath of fresh air she even is. So when I met my wife, whom then I was just talking to, I was actually talking to 7 or 8 other girls, nothing crazy, just getting to know people. I was at this time divorced. After leaving this Luciferian lifestyle, I weirdly enough get divorced.
Was there a kid?
Yeah. She left. She left, taking the child with her, and me being stuck in a hole of never having seen her or my child again. And it was probably due to all my past, all my error that I had made throughout the decisions I made up to that point. So life was rough. It was hard just on that alone.
What
But
was the explanation given to the ex from the ex-wife? Did she think that you were crazy with your Luciferianism before? Did you think you were crazy now leaving it? How's she interpreting? How open were you about getting baptized and following Jesus Christ?
I was open about it in the end, but this was before I left the Luciferian
Okay,
faith.
so it was already falling apart then.
Yeah. So for me, it was just that one last little thing of, okay, I've made my mistakes in life, and now I have to pay. This is my burden. But I told myself, I was like, all right, Father, no matter what, you got me here. You did what you did. I am no longer Luciferian. These people, if they're trying to kill me, I don't know if they are or not, but whatever it is, I know that you're preserving me. I know that you have saved me, and I know that you're continuing to save me. So I was kind of just going through the motions, but at the same time, praying and talking to God as much as I possibly could. And I meet this girl whom I text with for about 2 months until we finally talked for the first time on the phone. Um, and that was a very interesting conversation.
Was there anything special about how the digits got exchanged between you and her?
Yeah, I actually met her on it was like a dating app. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was through a dating app
Was
because
it
I was
was it a specifically a Christian one, or is there's even some LDS ones?
no, it was just a normal one of your more common dating apps, and um, I was just getting out and talking to people. Finally, I was divorced, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, I'll I just want to talk to people, and so me and I swiped right on her, and she we ended up talking through there, and then we ended up exchanging phone numbers, and we started texting, and So we text back and forth, and then finally we were able to talk on the phone with each other. And so he's talking, and just here's me, here's what I'm into, and I think she found out pretty quick I was very into God, and so we had the conversation, and she's like, "Yeah." I was like, "So what do you believe?" She goes, "Well, I'm Mormon." I was like, "Wait, like the Book of Mormon people?" She goes, "Yeah." Oh, so I started laughing, and she's like, "What's so funny?" And I was like, "Well, I used to be in a cult too." And so yeah,
Sure, she loved that.
oh yeah, she'll laugh when she sees that too. But um, yeah, I told her, I said, "Yeah, I used to be in a cult too," and she kind of paused, and I was like, "Oh, she's serious." I thought she was joking. So I don't know it anymore. I knew one in high school, but um, that was about it. So uh, I was like, "Okay, that's cool." So me being this new man of God, I was like, I'm not going to judge her based on that. She's probably a good person, seems like a good woman. And through the course of time of talking to her and these other women, I realized how different she was. They were ready to party and get down, and she was just like wanted to take a ride in a vehicle around town and listen to music. And I was like,
The,
that's
the more simple, wholesome pleasures.
yeah. I was like, okay. So, and that's exactly what we did first time going out. She was doing her little hand dance thing, and that was about it.
What's a hand dance?
I don't know. She's got like these little like hand popping motion things, and she's really good at it. Yeah, she's like phenomenal at it. It's like if there was a hand dance,
We might have to get some B-reel footage from her.
oh man, I could sneak it. She's recorded me
Okay.
enough,
Okay.
but but so yeah, I was talking to her about it, and I was thinking to myself, okay, God, I've got an idea. I'm going to save her. I'm going
Okay.
to save her from this Book of Mormon. So I started researching.
And that's from a real sincere place. In other words, you're
Yeah,
saying to where it's like, hey, I believe in the Jesus of the Bible. If she's founded on something else, let me do my duty.
yeah. So I remember I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to save her. So we was dating, and I was watching a lot of these Jeff Durbin videos. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him.
He's Apologia Studios.
Yeah. I used to
He's got a
watch.
decent beard as well.
Yeah, that's what kind of drew me in there. I was like, oh man, he's got the cool hair, he's got the beard. Yeah, who doesn't want to watch a guy with a cool beard up until you meet a guy with a real beard like
Yeah.
that one? But
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go. There you go.
But no, I was watching him and trying to get some pointers, and I was like, I don't know much about the Book of Mormon, but I'll watch him because I know he's pretty smart with it. So I was giving her all this information that I was given. She's like, "No, the Book of Mormon's true," and I was like, "Well, I just told you that it wasn't." So it was kind of like to me, I was like, "I told you it wasn't true, so you should not believe it." But we went on like that through the time we were dating and even engaged, and so it was just back and forth, and I was never angry about it. And then we finally got married,
It
and this,
sounds like you guys are pretty good about having disagreements and it not breaking relationships.
yeah, like she come her family was all LDS. Um, my family loved her to death. They're like, "Oh, there's something different about her." Um, in which that's a interesting story that I'll end up getting into also. But they're like, "I don't know, there's just some light about her and the way she." I was like, "Yeah, I noticed that too. The way she loves the Book of Mormon. She loves it." So we get married. And this is in 2017, and we moved from Bowling Green, Kentucky, to Madisonville, Kentucky. She took a job offer up here. So, we came. I was like, I'll go with you. It's not a problem. I don't know where Madisonville is, never heard of it. And when I got here, I was like, oh, it's one of those towns where you better not blink as you're passing through because you will miss it. So we get up here, and I move up here a few days before because she didn't want to live together until we were married. So I was like, okay, that's different. Most everybody I know lived together years. Most of them don't even get married. They just live together for 10 years. But so I moved up here a few days before we got married. Um, we get married at I asked her, I was like, where do you want to be married at? And she goes, well, I'd like to be married at the church I grew up in. I was like, okay, which she grew up just, 20 minutes from Madisonville. So we went and did that. And as we were in the church, it's the first time I've really ever been in uh, the LDS church. I was kind of looking at some of the paintings, and I noticed like the Book of Mormon sitting on some of the tables there, and kind of looked at it like, oh man, here we go. But this is what she wants, and I'm gonna give it to her. It's her wedding day, and she wanted to be married here. Me, I didn't care. So I got to thinking about it on that day, and I was like, you know what? I got an idea. I'm gonna do something for her. I'm gonna talk to the missionaries.
Mm.
And
You going to set them straight too?
yeah. I was like, through talking to the missionaries, if I can disprove what these young missionaries are talking about, maybe she'll see it that way, and we can go on and find us an actual church.
Let me ask a quick question without derailing too much. Does she understand that you had left Luciferianism after what, 12, 13 years?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
keep going. Want to meet with the missionary now.
That's what shocks most people too, is this lovely LDS girl fell in love with this ex-Luciferian guy. But so yeah, we get married, and life begins. Well, the next day I hadn't even contacted the missionaries, but our second day being married, they showed up at our doorstep, and it was weird because we didn't.
It's the Mormon grapevine.
Must have been, because she's like, I didn't tell anybody yet. I was like, well,
somebody knew. In other words, it made it there. In other words, missionaries are always looking for positive context. So it may be divine intervention, but I think there's something like that could be expected, because missionaries and those looking to support the missionaries, they're looking for opportunities like that.
Yeah, I figured it was probably maybe the missionaries in the town where we got married at probably told the ones up here, because they're 20 minutes apart, and most of them hang out together on their Mondays during their downtime. But she's like, well, they're here. What should I do? I was like, you know what? Invite them on in. And in walks these two amazing missionary men. One, he was super young missionary, your typical young missionary. I love him to death still this day. Just cool guy. The other one was a lot like myself, but he was from Wales, and he was a 20.
That's in England, right?
Yeah, and he was a 25-year-old missionary.
Okay.
So he was intelligent.
Was his story conversion, or just like felt the fire a little bit later than most?
Conversion.
Okay.
And I think he had converted before the typical age of most missionaries, but I think he waited till later, till he was like, you know what, I want to do this. And even to this day,
there is a world of difference between 19 years old and 25 years old.
Yes, there is. His intelligence level was a lot higher, and maybe it wasn't even intelligence, maybe it's just experience.
Yeah.
But he was good. So I instantly knew from my background that he was going to be a challenge for me. It's like, he's going to make this difficult. I was hoping it would just be two 18-year-old kids fresh out of high school. I can easily persuade young people like I used to before. Maybe if I just use this tactic one more time to persuade them to the Bible instead of Lucifer. So I did that, and I kept trying that and trying it, and it wasn't working. I mean, I went so far as making color-coded little graphs and charts, putting a lot of work in on these things to present to them. But they were coming over every single day. This wasn't like a once a week. They were coming over like 7 days a week. And we got to know them really, really, really well. And so he told me, he says, I challenge you. He said, you're a smart guy. You think you're a smart guy? And I was like, man, don't say it like that. Like, I know I'm a smart guy. So he's like, all right. He says, so I challenge you to read the Book of Mormon. I was like, okay, all right.
I double dare you.
He's like, do you have one? I was like, no. I said, my wife's got one in there. So he handed it to me, and I was like, well, this don't look like my wife's. And he says, what do you mean? I was like, well, this is a little bitty thing. Hers is like 7 inches thick. He says, oh, that's a quad. That's a quad. I was like, oh, okay. He's this is the Book of Mormon. So I flipped through it and I was like, a couple hundred pages. I was like, I mean, another testament of Christ fits in just these little amount of pages. Like, come on, man. Like that alone right there should tell you this can't be true. Like I could have thought this up. So he's like, well, then read it. So that's what I did. And I read the book in a week, and they came back, and I let them know. I was like, well, I'm done with the book. He says, it's only been a week. And I was like, well, it had me from cover to cover. I'm not going to lie.
Was
I was
there,
like,
do you remember what typically there's a certain part of the message that sticks out at different times when you read it. Do you remember what was sticking out to you?
Yeah. It was in Mormon. And it was the verse where it says, and God has shown you unto me.
Mormon chapter 8.
Yes. Yeah. So I got to thinking to myself, because he told me to read it and pray. But before I prayed, I got to thinking about it because I was obviously almost to the end of the book at that point. And I was like, wait a minute. So if Joseph Smith wrote this book and he made it all up, and he was doing it to bring people into a church, why would he write this verse?
Do you want me to pull it up real quick?
Yeah.
So Mormon chapter 8, starting with verse 35.
So yes, this is the one that really had me thinking the first time I read it. Behold, I speak unto you as if ye were present, yet ye are not. But behold, Jesus Christ has shown you unto me, and I know your doing. And I know that you do walk in the pride of your hearts, and there are none save a few only who do not lift themselves up in the pride of their hearts, unto the wearing of very fine apparel, unto envying and strifes and malice and persecutions, and all manner of iniquities. And your churches, yea, even every one have become polluted because of the pride of your hearts. For behold, you do love money, and your substance, and your fine apparel, and the adorning of your churches, more than ye love the poor and the needy, the sick and the afflicted. O ye pollutions, ye hypocrites, ye teachers, who sell yourselves for that which will canker, why have ye polluted the holy church of God? Why are ye ashamed to take upon you the name of Christ?
Oh, goodness. That's the money shot right there.
Yeah. That's the one that had me thinking, because at this point, I'd already knew enough about Latter-day Saints that they dressing up on Sundays and these beautiful temple buildings and the money that the church has.
You've seen a mega church before.
Yeah. It's like, I've seen a mega church, but like, that's the church where you can go and wear in blue jeans if you want. Yeah. So for me, there was only one church that really, there were two, honestly, to me that fit this description. And that was the Latter-day Saint Church and the Catholic Church. Two churches who are very similar. But I got to thinking about it, and I was like, well, this could be the Catholic Church. But if this is another testament of Jesus Christ only teaches what his Father does. And from what I can tell in the Bible, God usually is talking to his people. He's not talking to outsiders. He is talking to his people. And so I was like, well, okay, so if this is God talking, he's talking to his church. So why would Joseph Smith write this verse condemning a church he's trying to start? That would not make sense to me. Mm-hmm. So I was like, there has to be something to this. So I continued reading the rest of the Book of Mormon all the way through Moroni. And Moroni made some sense to me as far as like baptisms for babies and things like that, because I'd seen it in Catholic church. I've seen it in every church. And I always wonder, why are we doing that for? But I started praying about it, and I was like, Father, if you've brought me this far and you haven't let me down, I mean, for goodness sake, you pulled me from the trenches of the hell I was in. You pulled me from this world that I've known for so long. Surely you would not let me be deceived now. So tell me, did Joseph Smith write this book, or was this book a divine revelation that he wrote through you? Was he a true living prophet? And so I went to work the next day, and I drove about, usually it was like 45 minutes each way. where I was working at the time. So I was coming home one day. It was like 3 in the afternoon. I stopped at a gas station in a town where I don't know anybody. I just moved up here, started working there, and I'm in the gas station, and this guy walks over to me and says, "Hey, man." I was like, "Hey." He says, "Do you know that book's true?" I started looking around like in a magazine. I was like, "Which one?" He says, "That one. That one you read?" I was like, "Which one?" Like, I don't have that book on me. I don't how So I scratch my head and I turn around and he was not there. He was like gone. Like, I don't know if he walked out of the store, and if he was a real person, I guess he walked really, really fast. But even then, my mind was like, okay, all the way home, I was like, if he was a real person, how would he know what book? Like I was.
And he's even using the same technique that you tried to use on your girlfriend, now wife.
That isn't wrong. I never noticed that before.
Yeah. In other
Oh
words,
man,
he's using your same exact technique immediately against you. Well, I said it, didn't I?
I honestly just now thought about that. I have to tell her this. So
Mhm.
this is going to be good. She's going to love it. But yeah, so I got home and I was like, all right. So I spent the week praying and praying and praying just to make sure that the answers I was getting, I was like, I don't want to contradict you, Father. You know my heart, but you also know that I literally spent so long as a fool. So I'm trying to mature with you now. And so just keep sending me signs. And so as I read the book, I just had this overwhelming feeling just coming through my body, and of knowing like this makes sense. Like other sheep I have who are not as fold, like they will touch me, they will see me, they will hear my voice. Well, what other people in history did that? That was a question I had 15, 16, 17 years ago. Like, who was these other people he was talking about? Um, you know, things like that. It's just things I'd always thought about. And I was like, this actually gives me an answer. But so I started asking the questions. The missionaries came back and they was like, so what are you thinking? I was like, I have to say, I was like, I think I believe this book is true. And if to believe this book is true is to believe that Joseph Smith Jr. is a prophet of God. I was like, but I have a question. He said, what's that? And I was like, I've done some church research. I've looked up a little bit of your history.
Y'all are on the internet. Oh, and
I was like, I've seen some very, very, very ugly, very, very, very ugly things. I was like, so I'm curious. I said, what's the possibility? And my wife could vouch for this. I was like, what's the possibility that maybe the Book of Mormon's true and Joseph Smith is a prophet, but everything after him, like something went wrong. Something don't sound right with all the rest of it. And he's like, no, no. And even my wife at the time, she was like, no, if you believe that to be true, the church today has to be true. I'm like, well, maybe, but that's but
you know that's built into the introduction of the Book of Mormon.
yeah. And I told him, I was like, so what's Mormon talking about? Like, which one? I was like, well, where the verse I literally just read, I was showing them. It's like, what?
It's like,
Yeah,
didn't
Mormon 8
we
right
just
here.
read this one together?
Yeah.
It's
I
like,
told them,
this one. Am I reading a different Book of Mormon than you guys?
yeah. So one of them's like, oh, I'll have to look that one up. And I was like, so you don't know it, which is fine. If you can't memorize the verse, that's fine. But I was like, we'll go over this together. I said, so we read it, and I was like, who are they talking about? Well, they must be talking about somebody else because that's not us. He's like, so what other church in the world would have those things? And I'm like, well, the Catholic Church. But to assume that would to assume that the Catholic Church is his people, because God usually warns his people. He's talking to his people.
Well, and the people that he's lamenting over, he says, Jesus has shown you to me. How have you polluted the Holy Church of God?
Yeah.
Is he referring to the Catholics as the Holy Church of God?
Yeah. I was like, so he's talking to this church. I was like, so there just has to be something wrong. And they're like, no. So I eventually just settled with the fact, because I was like, I'll never know. I'll never know if something went wrong or not. Joseph Smith was the prophet and Brigham Young was the successor.
Oh,
Unfortunately, Joseph was martyred along with his brother, who would have been, it might, especially at that time, I was like, well, Hiram probably would have been a prophet, and if not, it could have been Samuel. I mean, it would have. I felt like it'd been some type of lineage, like most of the biblical ones had. But hey, and that's not all of them. But I was like, all right, so there's nothing wrong. I guess Brigham could be a prophet. I don't know how I feel about the man after reading some of his history and some of his teachings, but
have you guys been on the internet?
Yeah. So they told me, they're like, well,
what you're asking.
Yeah. So I told some of them, one guy in particular, he's like, you know what I think it is? Usually if you have something in common with somebody, you don't like it. I said, what do you mean? He says, maybe you're just a lot like Brigham. That's why you don't like him, because he might not have liked you either. And I was like, well, I mean, I guess if you'd fit us both in the same room, I was like, I don't know how me and him would have been the same.
Well, you definitely have the reach advantage. He was only about 5 foot even.
Oh, man. Well, he looked like a stocky little fella, but I mean,
I didn't mean to derail you. Maybe, no, you guys, you're too similar. You guys wouldn't have liked each other.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, maybe that's it. So over time, I was going to church. We were going on Sundays. I got into young men. The young men's group, was in there with them and helping teach some of them different things from my past. Not fully.
It's still not a member of the church, or were you?
Yeah, I was a member at that time because I got
okay.
One of the elders had baptized me, and so a few months. Yeah,
let me just ask real quick. How, in other words, your dramatic experience of leaving Luciferianism and hearing the voice of your Heavenly Father tell you specifically, get baptized, you felt that relief come up. Was it different in this baptism to become a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Yeah, because I felt closer to the truth. I didn't have like this Holy Spirit moment. But it definitely felt different. Like it felt like I belonged to something. I was like, okay, so this is the true church. Then I'm baptized into it. So this is good. So I felt good about it. But
so now you're in young men. You're at least giving them the mild sauce version of what had brought you to that point.
Yeah, just to kind of open their eyes to be like, hey, here's some things you can be watchful for. I'm not going to tell you everything that's happened. Maybe we'll discuss that later on in life when you're a man. But right now, here's some things as a young man, having been your age once, that I experienced. So just kind of be watchful for things. And it worked out well, actually. They were like, this is good. I see things like this in school all the time. And so, we just kind of did the church thing. We would help clean the church. I was going through young men's. I helped I was an assistant scoutmaster over some of the young men of the church. My wife, she took a few callings. So, and then we, had our son, and we were bringing him up in the church. And so I was like, okay, so I'm here. I'm that guy. I'm that typical,
I'm on the road to the celestial kingdom.
Yeah. Anytime my beard would get about this length right here, it was like, well, you going to shave that thing? And I'm like, I mean, do I have to? Is that a rule? I didn't know that was a thing. I'd like to keep it. Well, the Lord really wants you clean shaven. So a couple times I'd shaved it, and I was like, oh man,
and I'm noticing, you're noticing a familiarity to where you're going to get directions by those in charge of the organization.
Yeah. So it was like, all right. And then I started feeling weird. I was like, clean shaven, and it's not just that, but it was like, clean shaven and dressing nice. And these people are really into the temple, which is fine, I guess, if it's God's temple.
Had you been to the temple yet? Have you been to the LDS temple yet?
Yeah. I went there and done a few baptisms.
Okay.
At that point,
but it had not gone through the endowment session.
No. So for a while, they were wanting us to get sealed. So I talked to my wife about it and was like, yeah, if we're going to do it, we need to be sealed so we can be together for all eternity.
Had she been through the endowment session yet?
No.
Okay.
So we went through the temple marriage prep class, and that lasted like 8 weeks. We met like every Sunday. And at the end of it, I just never felt right. So I didn't do it. And then
The temple marriage?
Yeah. Something.
How did your wife take it? Because you guys have been through transitions together, being at very different levels religiously, well, at least very different positions religiously. And it seems like the relationships maintained strong. How did she take it when that wasn't something you were going to go through with?
I don't know. It's almost like we were both being drawn to not go through with it. Weirdly enough. And I kept thinking, I was like, why is this happening? Like, we need to get sealed. Because we eventually, it's like a year later, we talked about it again, and we took the class again. And so we went all through the class and was like, all right, now we can plan it. Like, we're ready now. Maybe we just wasn't ready before. Maybe that's what it was. And that's how we took it. So we went through the class again. We started talking about we need to plan a day so we can go and get sealed. And that's it. We're good. We're good. We'll pay our tithing. We'll go to the temple all the time. We'll be sealed. We'll be sealed to our son. So, and then we're going to the celestial kingdom. There's no questions asked. We're good. We were prepared. And then right at that time, I started going back to Joseph Smith and thinking about him, just thinking a lot about him.
Positive way, questions, concerns?
Positive. Something I went back because this was 3.5 years later from the time I was baptized, and then like halfway through we took our temple class, and then towards the end we did our temple class again, and then I started having like this moment that I had when I first before I first joined about Joseph. Why was he such a different prophet than what Brigham was? Why was he such a prophet, such a different prophet than what our modern prophet is? Russell Nelson today, or even any of them. What makes him so different? Why do I feel? Why am I reading that he was a polygamist when I see no proof of it? There was things I was coming across that didn't make sense, and so I asked somebody. At that time, I was like, "So I have a question." They're like, "What?" I'm from Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking one of the guys in the churches. He was one of the guys who always liked to, like, if I didn't come to church on Sunday, he was literally knocking on my door and looking through windows. Literally, that's a true story. Many a times, true story. Knocking on windows, like walking around the house. So I asked him, I was like, "So you moved here from Utah, right?" And he says, "Yeah." I was like, "So I'm a Kentucky boy." I said, "We shoot a lot of guns here." He said, "Should I leave?" And I was like, No, you're good. You're fine." But I was like, I know enough about, I guess, guns to know that something with something with Joseph's murder don't make sense to me. He said, "How so?" And I was like, "Why did the other two not have guns on them?" I was like, I told him, I said, "Man, like, realistically, put yourself in a situation
Let me
like
ask you, is this 2018, 2020? When is this?
2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic or at the pandemic started? Because it kind of went into policies really started shifting around March of 2020.
It was kind of towards the end of 2020.
I'm pretty sure that April of 2020 it was still normal general conference, but then the next one was remote only, and the leadership was 100% masks.
Yeah.
Okay, so
No, this was at the this is about the end of 2020 going into 2021. And I told him, I was like, he's like, "Are you going back to the whole Joseph Smith's a prophet and Book of Mormon's true, but nothing else is?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I just can't not help but think about it, because," I said, "it just seems like a real divine calling that Joseph went through to translate the Book of Mormon and to be a prophet his whole life. Like, everything he did was hard." I said, "Now you just, like, somebody died and you're a prophet. Does it?" I said, "I don't know. I just feel like it'd be more of a divine calling than, well, this guy's dead and now you're being called." And
The spiritual gift is just outliving others.
Yeah. I was like, it's just not something doesn't seem right with it. And I was like, but anyway, I was like, no, it's just, I was like, why did the two men in the room not have guns for? He said, you talk about Willard Richards and John Taylor. And I was like, yeah. I was like, because I told him, I'm sorry, man. If I've got 20 guns aiming a gun at me, I'm running. I'm not standing there with a walking stick. I'm running. I'm gone. And I was like, it's just, I'm trying to figure out, so I'm trying to make things make sense.
Is he giving meaningful answers, or helping you work through it, or just listening to you muse out loud?
Mostly listening to me muse out loud. Only by the end of it, me thinking I'm going to get an answer. Well, let's refer to the Book of Mormon. Let's go to a verse. And I'm like, I don't know what that has nothing to do with the questions I just asked.
Yeah.
And I guess to him, he thought it did, but it didn't.
There's a lot of that. I mean, just a quick anecdote. It is so common in Mormon culture. If they know that somebody has a concern or a doubt, they usually say, let me drop off this conference talk with you and not give any explanation, just with the understanding to where if this doesn't answer your question, you're not as spiritual as I am. But I sure love you. Let me bring you some cookies.
That's exactly what it is.
So he shares with you a verse, doesn't apply, but he thought it does.
Yeah. So I eventually just settled with the fact I went on for almost the whole following year.
Okay. And you're staying active in church at the time throughout this, correct?
No.
No.
I left because I kept reading the Book of Mormon. Never stopped reading it. I never doubted once after that, even after leaving, that Joseph Smith was a prophet. I kind of just was in the mindset that maybe it's just like it was in biblical times, and there's not really a church, but then again, that would confuse me with Mormon 8, but I was like, Joseph Smith was a prophet. The Book of Mormon's true. I'm not seeing anything after that.
How are you feeling, like your personal closeness to God during this time? In other words, you're no longer active in the institution, but how are you feeling as far as a personal walk with God?
At that, all through 2021, because after that, at the end of 2022, going into 2021, the whole year of 2021, I felt closer to him than I ever had.
Good.
I found myself, well, I'm not at church, so I found myself praying daily, and not just daily, but multiple times a day. I was reading my Bible, reading my Book of Mormon. If I wasn't reading it, I was listening to it on an AirPod or something. Like it was.
You wanted to consume it. In other words, you're trying to feast on well, it sounds like it's natural for you to feast on the Word of God in this season of your life. Yeah.
And so I literally took what Joseph said to heart, that any man who lacks wisdom ask of God. So I did that with everything in my life. And I was like, well, Joseph communed with God. And this was a 14-year-old boy who ended up talking to him throughout his whole life. And I felt, in my opinion, that Joseph was teaching something that I didn't hear a lot of people talking about, which was we all have the opportunity to speak with God. We all have the opportunity to drop to our knees and talk to him and ask him things and to allow him to give us answers. So I spent 2021 doing that. And that's all I did the whole year, was just, me and her would talk, and we would talk about things together. Our Sunday mornings were every day. For us, it was church every day in our house, and we would have conversations with each other, and we did that for a whole year. And then finally, I was sitting one night, and I was like, I'm gonna click on the old YouTube, and weirdly enough, the first thing that pops up was who killed Joseph Smith.
Oh goodness, part 1.
And I'm thinking it was maybe an algorithm.
There's no way that caught your attention.
Oh yeah, see, before that, a few hours before that, I was actually Googling things like, could somebody have killed Joseph Smith other than the mob or something? I was trying to Google something. I was like, something's wrong. Something's not right. I even typed in one time, did Brigham kill Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to YouTube and typed it. And then,
let me ask, up until this point, had you heard anybody express those concerns or possibilities?
no.
Okay.
It was never even a thought. Like nobody ever talked about it. I'd wondered it a couple times.
Because you're in the Midwest. I mean, in Utah, there's a little. It's kind of the epicenter of Mormon culture and concerns and anti-Mormonism, stuff like that. So those topics tend to circulate more avidly in Utah culture. But now you're in the heartland of America.
Yeah.
And you've got those concerns. The movie pops up on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, well, this would be interesting. I'll have to check this out. So I started watching it that night. And so, you know, my son was running around the house, wife was doing this and that around here, and I'm sitting here watching it. And by the end of it, like, I remember sitting back in my chair, I took my headphones off and looked at her and was like, wow. She said, what? And I was like, you're gonna have to watch this. She said, what is it? And I was like, you may or may not like this, depending on how you feel. But I said, you need to watch it. I was like, because it seems like something was going on. And I said, this makes things make a little more sense. So she ended up watching it. She watched it, and we were kind of in awe. And I thought to myself, I was like, who put this together? Like, who did this? Is there a group of them? Like, is this just a handful of people who are like, hey, man, this is a cool thought? So, it was in the comments because I started searching up. I seen a name in the comment, and it led me to other channels like Hemlock Knots, was it Zombie?
Sombre, DOC.
Sombre, yeah. I started watching that one, and I was really consuming a lot of that channel. I was listening to a lot of those while I was working and stuff. But come to find out, there was through the comments, I was like, I'm seeing some of the same names, and saw a link to the website. I guess
the Doctrine of Christ
Doctrine of Christ website. Yep. So I started going there, and I was reading everything, and I was like, oh my gosh. And she's like, so what are they? Are they like the LDS? Or I was like, no, I don't think they're affiliated with any LDS church. Like, I think this is something different. I was like, I don't know what it is. And so we saw that there were Zoom meetings on Mondays, so we started watching them. And so I remember watching the first one. She went to bed that night. So I was like, oh, wait, it's Monday. I'm gonna try to catch this if I can. So I went in my room, sat down at the desk, turned my computer on, and just started watching it. It was like, oh, wow. It's like, who is this forceful fella talking on the other side of the screen?
Did he have a voice about like this and go from topic to topic? And as we breathe, did he have that kind of a voice?
He very much did. Very much did. So so I thought to myself, I was like, okay, all right, this it's throwing me off a little bit.
Were there patterns that were causing triggers as you were listening?
Yeah.
Was it conscious or more subtle?
For me, it was conscious. Like,
hey, it's like, boom, I know this.
Yeah, it's like I've dealt with this before. These very much the linguistic techniques was like, I was like, man, I know this because I used to do this. I was trained to do this. So it threw me off. But I was like, maybe it's just, don't judge him, Eric. Don't judge him. Maybe that's what Lucifer wants you to do, because it's like, well, you know, you left us, and now there's this guy who acts like people you used to know, who talks like this guy you used to know, and a couple of guys you used to know. So maybe we can use that to advantage and steer him away from the truth. So I was like, okay, that's what's going on. Trying to steer me away from the truth. Not this time, Satan. Not this time. Mm-hmm. So I kept watching. Well, after 2 or 3 Mondays, my wife started watching them, and um, she had she was like me at that point. Um, she was a little thrown off.
Did he set off her creepometer?
A lot,
Okay.
a whole lot, so much so that she didn't even want to watch.
Mhm.
But she did because she was like, I guess it's important to you, and it's important for us as a couple to know this truth together. So we just kind of kept watching. But then we watch on Tuesday nights too. Like Dustin Grady, um, and some others. But next thing I know, I reached out to Dustin Grady, and he was helping me with a little bit of knowledge. I actually was on the website and was just hit the little chat now thing, and ended up being Dustin Grady. So
I didn't realize we had the budget for that. Just on his beck.
Yeah, it was like almost instant too. I was like, what? These people are like 24/7 live chat.
I have to ask him about that because I don't know how that if it's just like a pop-up. But anyway, keep going.
I always meant to ask him that. You'll have to let me know what he says, because that's literally, it was like, which I guess I'm a little bit ahead of y'all on time, but it was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
I'm just going to proactively say, Dustin Grady, if you're watching this, give us an explanation in the comments, and I'm going to pin your comment.
He's dedicated, man. He is dedicated. I love it.
Okay, so chat pops up. He responds. You find out later it's Dustin Grady. But what happened in that interaction?
Well, we exchanged phone numbers, and he called me up, and I knew instantly. I was like, okay, this guy's different. He's not like the guy I've been watching on Mondays. So there's sincerity and love coming from behind his voice. And I knew that his intentions weren't, hey, I want all your money. It was, hey, I want you to know this truth, and I'll help you understand it. And so I stayed in communication with him. So I would join every single Monday night meeting. I was going to the Facebook page, and remember watching, being led to many other YouTube videos. And the first YouTube video I ever watched was yours. I remember I was like, so there's a lot of guys in on this, and they're all so different, and they all teach so well. I'm a little thrown off with Mondays, but it's okay. Maybe that's just the way the man carries himself, and that's fine.
You should see the way he does handshakes.
Woo, I don't want that. So eventually I watched everybody's videos, and I was even going through the website, clicking on any video, any podcast I could get a hold of, some stuff that were, was a lot older, just trying to consume it all. And eventually got connected through a Monday night chat with Dustin Smith, whom instantly I knew he was different. There's a lot of sincerity behind him, a lot of love, a lot of real genuine, real super genuine. And so I was talking to him, and come to find out he was actually in the Who Killed Joseph Smith video.
Yeah,
like,
he's Hiram.
Wow. I was like, which one were you? He's like, yeah, I was Hiram. I was like, oh, man.
Even Dustin Grady has a small clip inside of there when there's some reenactment regarding courtroom scenes. Dustin Grady plays a quick part as one of the attorneys. He looks really good there.
Oh, wow. But yeah, so it was like, I kind of got connected with Dustin Smith, who really, really, really just kind of brought me along. And any question I had, I would text his phone, and he would have an answer. And the next thing I know, I'm being invited. I get an invitation to a school that he was a part of, that everybody was a part of, that a lot of good men were a part of. And that was a different experience. I felt a lot of
When and where did this school meet?
every every
Was it
Sunday at
Sunday
about
mornings at 5 a.m. Mountain Standard Time?
yes, it was.
Was there a weird guy with a big beard playing hymns on the guitar?
There was actually, yeah.
There was.
He was pretty good. He's pretty good. I'll give him that. It brought up a lot of good questions in there too. Wonder if he ever went to jail or not. I don't know.
I'll tell you.
But so yeah, that's what I was doing. Now I felt like I was like, okay.
So in other words, there's a school with a lot of people that are that have been part of the Doctrine of Christ community meeting on Sunday mornings, and that's how you and I ended up connecting. Is by that. I remember one of the first times that I heard you share a testimony inside of there is when I realized, hey, I like this Eric guy. And I think my friend Jeff and I, we not that Jeff, the good Jeff. my friend Hefe, my friend Hefe Griffin and I, we sent you a video. I think we even sang you "Low Rider." Didn't we send you that video?
Yeah.
Eric, I wish we lived closer together. This is me, Jacob.
Jeff Griffin.
Okay. It's good hearing your stories. We just wanted to show you how cool we were with our sunglasses. We had an excuse. So keep at it, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Maybe even sometime this week.
All my friends.
In the low rider.
Like to sure fly right. Yeah, you messed me up, Jake.
All my friends in the low rider. That's out of tune.
Y'all did. I still have that video too.
So, we were able to connect with you a little bit remotely. But tell me your impression of things, because I'll just bring people kind of up to speed fast. School happening in the morning, primarily for the efforts of, hey, what's the work of helping people understand the awful situation and how the doctrine of Christ leads them to know Jesus Christ in this life. So Sunday mornings were dedicated to that. We would start with prayer. We would start with sacrament and songs, hymns, and then oftentimes there would be a scriptural lesson with that same type of voice. How were you interpreting Sunday mornings?
Not what I expected. I don't know why I was expecting like a classroom looking setting. I really don't. That was just probably me. I wasn't
tables gathered around tables.
Yeah. So it threw me off, but
desks.
It's like I was sitting there like, okay, I'm thrown off. This is not what I picture, because you always picture something before you go into it when you've never done it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, hey, there's no telling how Christ and his disciples met, so that's fine. No telling where they met at. So, so yeah, so I had really good experiences. I heard a lot of good testimony. Ending at the end of those every Sunday, like, I would stand up and just kind of stretch out for them, because they were pretty lengthy, but I would stretch out and was like, it just kind of felt edified. Like I took a lot away today. I took a lot from the Spirit today, and I felt great. I felt super, super great. And that went on just about every Sunday for a little bit.
It's going into months of it, isn't it? Is this about the beginning of 2022 when you joined?
Yeah, I think it was like January or February when I joined. So yeah, I'd been in about a month and a half, and then that's when I started having those dreams, was in March.
Okay. And share about those dreams, because you've shared with me personally before, and I think this is appropriate here. And I'll point out the same person who was doing the Monday night calls with this tone of voice and having techniques that you recognized, he's also leading things most commonly on Sunday mornings. And tell me how you're interpreting things and how that led. What were the dreams that you had in connection with that?
Well, I mean, we were told, I remember sitting there Sunday and we were being told, that we should start praying and asking Father for us to receive dreams and visions and
revelatory dreams.
Yeah. So I was like, I took that to heart. I was like, this guy is our leader. I think I'm not sure, but he seems like the guy who is so much more advanced than myself and the rest of us that I should be listening. So I'm going to take his advice and ask for those revelatory dreams, and I did that. Um, so in March, I had my first dream. After about 2 weeks of praying about it and asking Father, like, I am sincere in asking you that I'm not going to use this to my advantage or to my will. I have nothing that I want to gain from it. I just want to know, like, am I on the right track? Am I doing good? If I am on the right track, don't worry about telling me I'm on the right track. Just tell me, hey, you're doing good. You've come a long way compared to where you were 20 years ago. So I did that and received a dream that night that I ended up waking up from, kind of panicked a little bit because you wake up thinking a dream is real until you realize it was just a dream. But it was a dream of this school falling apart. And
when you say this school, the one that you'd been attending on Sunday mornings.
Yes. The one I attended on Sunday mornings was the one that in my dream that fell apart, because in the dream, it showed me in this sandy area, I was in this like a valley, but there were mountains all the way around me. And there was one large building in the middle of it. And the mountains, the ground, even the building was covered in sand. And there were people walking around it, just dreadful. It was almost zombie-like, but they weren't zombies. They were just like people that have like just bodies moving. And I remember like there were like boulders here and there everywhere. And there was like almost like tumbleweed it kind of looked like in a way. And the building in the distance, yeah, I could tell the building in the distance, there was like glass still hanging, but some was broken. It looked horrible until I had a hand that I could only see maybe, just a little bit of that, maybe wrist up, reach out and grab me and took me to another place. And it was in that room.
Can you describe how you entered that room and where you turned? Just give some physical description.
There was a white door. And I remember whoever was leading me, again, I couldn't see him, but I could see his hand. But the door opened, this white door opened, and we walked through. And as I come in, to my right, there was these men sitting there, and it was everybody in the school. And I remember they were having this conversation, but I couldn't hear any audible voice from them. I could only hear the man in front of me who was speaking. And he didn't speak the whole time, but he just said, "Watch." And
so, this is the same man who was leading you, that you saw his hand and wrist.
Yes. So I was just kind of standing there, and he was walking around the room, and they were going on. They didn't know we were there. And the room started getting really, 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 really dark. And then the next thing I know, as the room was getting dark, there was light shining through, but it was only on certain individuals. And those people were being taken away. They were taken out until there was nothing but these other people in there with just complete and utter darkness. So I knew at that point who was taken out of the room by this light and who was left in that darkness. I saw their faces. I remember.
You knew who they were.
Yeah, without a doubt. So that morning when I woke up, that's where the dream ended. So in the morning when I woke up, I text Dustin Smith and this other guy.
The other Jeff.
Yeah. I text them and told them both. And Dustin, I ended up talking to him that day, and the other one said, "Hey, I'll give you a call when I can." And I still have those text messages.
Yeah.
Right here on this phone. But so they called and I told them about this dream. I didn't give up when I was talking to both of them. I never told them any names, but I did tell them that I was taken to this this desolate place, and then was taken to to the school. and that it was being separated. They were separating them out. And I told him, I was like, he's like, did you pray about it? And I was like, well, I did. I told this, I said, I did pray about it. I prayed about this morning I woke up, and the answer I received is that school is going to fall apart. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I was like, but honestly, it felt like the separation of the wheat and tares. Now, I'm not saying that's it or that was the thing. I said, but that's kind of what it reminded me of, was the separation of the wheat and tares by being there. And I said, and that's what I prayed about, and that's the answer I received. So that was March when I told both of them. Through the remaining months from April, May, and in June, I started having other dreams, more revelatory dreams about certain things that were happening. Like I remember sitting in one of my dreams, I was sitting in this farmhouse looking place, and there was a older lady and an older gentleman sitting over to my right, and there was a young woman who I saw her walk through a foyer to a door, and she opened the door, and I guess there was two men coming off the porch, and those two men were Joseph and Hiram. And I remember looking out the window, and they stopped about halfway. They were heading to this barn, and they stopped about halfway, and they turned to each other, and Joseph put his hand on Hiram's shoulder and was saying something. I couldn't hear any of the words, and Hiram looked kind of in dread, like, I don't know. It just kind of like, it was a pitiful, dreadful look. And Joseph was trying to lift his spirits.
Was the look at all like, do we really want to do this? Or was it more like lamenting?
I think it was like lamenting, like, because he just looked worried. He looked really, really concerned, looked really worried, was kind of scared of something. And Joseph was like smiling the whole time. It wasn't like a huge smile, but he was enough smile of like, I love you, brother. And he put his hand on his shoulder, and then they embraced in this hug. And as they were as Hiram was turning to go walk, Joseph was about to turn, and he looked through the window over where I was and just smiled, nodded his head, and then continued on their walk.
He acknowledged you.
Yeah. So it's like he was there. He knew I was there. So it was really, 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 waking up from it threw me off quite a bit. So I started asking Father, I was like, Lord, if you could maybe help me interpret some of these dreams, or give me more that would help me better understand what they are. That would be awesome. That would be great. Like, you've brought me this far. I know you love me.
I like the way that you end your prayers with your Heavenly Father. If you could do this, that'd be awesome.
If you could do this, that would be great.
There's a lot of gratitude expressed in that.
But yeah, he really, really started blessing me with these dreams, and some of them were scary. But my last dream, before the school really started to fall apart, was the one that kind of concerned me, because I saw the intentions of evil that was left in it.
And that was in the dream you saw that?
Yeah. And it was in correlation with my first dream of the ones who were left.
Can you share that dream? The specifics of it?
Yeah. So I was in a town, and it kind of looked like a city, more like Chicago or New York or something like that. It was a bigger city.
Big city, big buildings, lots of people.
Yeah. And there was a lot of looting going on. I remember seeing fires everywhere. There was a lot of looting going on. Everything's going crazy. It just felt like lawless there. And I was walking through there, very similar to the first dream, and that same hand grabs me again and pulls me from it. And next thing I know, I'm finding myself at this lake looking area, and I'm sitting there, and I kind of look over, and there's a man sitting there, and I can see kind of his silhouette from this light, but the light's still too bright that I can't see him. I can't give the description of what he would look like in that dream
because of the brightness.
Yeah. So just asking me, what questions do you have? I'm ready to answer them. So I was like, my first dream, what was that? He says, it was a version. It was the separation of the wheat and tares. He says, there have been many and there'll be more, but this is one. He says, that school is going to fall apart. He says, I'm going to separate it, and it will be separated. And I was like, okay. I was like, where will we go from there? He says, Joseph will come. He says, and those that are pulled from the school will know when Joseph comes. He will visit you. And I was like, okay. I was like, so as far as, how do we go about? Are we a church? Are we a group? He says, you're men of God. And it was just the answers were real. He answered them in the way that I guess I would have answered somebody in my earlier life.
It's almost like he knows how to speak to you in your exact language.
Yeah, but that's what was crazy is I understood all of it. So I come out of that dream, and I took those answers, but at that point there, it was too late. I was like, okay, I got these answers, and that's fine. That's what I wanted to know. But I was like, but Father, I have to know now. I seen a silhouette. I want to know what he looks like. I want to meet your son. I want to meet him. Like, I don't want to live my human life and not have and leave here not having seen his face in my mortal life. And so I prayed that and prayed that and prayed that. And it was at this point, I kind of stepped away from the school. I should probably go back to that. I kind of stepped away from the school a little bit because I knew what it was. Like, I knew what was fixing to happen. And it was kind of worrisome because some of the guys in there I love dearly, I thought were like best friends with somebody else that I was like, this is not going to go well. And how do you tell somebody, hey, I think your best bud is something
trained in the dark arts.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know how to tell you that because I want to keep my friendship with you. And that's what I was telling Dustin even now is like, if I could go back, I probably would have done that different for sure.
In other words, vocalize that concern.
Yeah.
It makes sense that it's difficult to do. I really don't know how well it would have been received.
Yeah. That was my thought was like, I don't know. Cause there was moments where I started to think in the group as a whole, not even just the school, but as a group as a whole are they following God or are they following this man here? Like, I'm a little unsure with some people because I feel like they're following him and looking to him for answers instead of trying to receive answers on their own. And so I kind of stepped away, and then the next thing I know, my wife messages me and says, you need to watch this video. I was like, oh man. I was like, what is it? So it's a video of Dustin Smith and his wife being interviewed by you. So I was like, oh, wow. I was like, what's this about? She goes, I don't know, but I watched it. And she goes, I don't know the detail of things, but something's going on. So I was like, oh no. So I started watching it and I instantly knew what was going on. So I reached out to Dustin and was talking about it. It's like, now you remember me telling you about this dream? Like, that's when it hit me. I was like, okay, so this is not just a dream anymore. He actually showed me what was going to happen before it ever happened. He knew this was going to happen.
Yeah. And let me just give you a little bit of details of what was happening right then and there. This is at the very end of July, beginning of August that this happens. The same person from the Monday night Zoom calls and leading things on Sunday mornings, making things very oriented around his experiences, but I am just a man. That same individual was now becoming very, very controlling with Dustin and his wife, Maren, regarding where they were going to live. And with accusations of they're taking advantage of others. And he was wanting to have a disciplinary council type setting with a group of people, again, even though he had spent hours degrading them in a public setting that was recorded. Incredibly degrading. And so now it's like, well, Dustin, let me just interview you. And you probably saw in the interview, even though I love Dustin and Maren both, I tried to make sure that I do not hold back on the questions and I don't ask the questions in a delicate manner.
Yeah.
And he was incredibly, in other words, that same individual for the first time ever ended up messaging Dustin saying, "We are holding a meeting tonight. If you're able to attend, it will be at 30 place." Dustin just says, "We won't be in attendance for your kangaroo court. Will you please just play this interview on our behalf if you hold a meeting?" And he canceled it under false pretexts. It was, in other words, he was becoming incredibly insecure in his ability to control their life. And if he couldn't control their life, he had now completely lost his ability, except for just a small, tiny group of people. Other than that tiny group, he had lost his ability to control how others perceive Dustin and Maren.
Wow. So yeah, that's the thing is like the stuff. Some things I've ended up finding out over time talking to Dustin and asking him, what was going on, and some very, very crazy out there things that were going on this other individual's behalf.
Yeah.
Stuff I'd even watched, I'd seen some of your videos where you had talked about it, and I would talk to Dustin about it, and I think even Dustin Grady once, I think, but so yeah, that's
all of them. There's just a tiny group, and they have no part in the Doctrine of Christ community. They've literally founded themselves on that man. And I'll just mention briefly, because I've recorded, people who are watching this likely have already seen the interview Phil Davis questions. And in that one, not only did he record himself violently masturbating with ritualistic type language inside of it, but rather than repenting of it, he doubled down on it and he taught sermons to people on how it's in harmony with God. And up to this point, I've decided not to make that public, but there was a few people who recorded his masturbation doctrine sermon and sent it to me. So I've got a couple of different options.
Wow.
But in other words, those people have absolutely no part of the Doctrine of Christ community.
Yeah, oh wow. That's so, well, yeah, talking to Dustin up to this point, and I was Dustin, the whole Dustin thing really got me, and I knew beforehand that this was going to be bad, because the other guy I told the dream about, I used to talk to him quite a bit, and in April of last year I retired from my job and decided, I'm going to chill, and I'm going to focus on doing this full time. And so that's what I did. Well, around June, I think it is about the time I started stepping away. And mostly because of this guy here, because I knew that first dream was coming after this man had called me, because I was contacted and was asked, do you have a job? And I'm like, no, I'm retired. Oh, you're retired. Yeah. I could have swore I thought people knew that by now, but why? No, why do you ask? Like, why? In my mind, I'm thinking, why do you care if I have a job? What's that? Why is that your business of my personal life? I don't, especially something like that. Spiritual life, if you want to come in, fine. But
who was this guy asking you?
Who was it asking me?
Yeah.
The other Jeff.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The other Jeff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll just point this out. That Jeff is the foremost defender of Phil's masturbation doctrine. Not only on Phil's masturbation sermon, he spoke up afterwards in support of it. And when somebody from the Doctrine of Christ community very sincerely called Jeff and Phil to repentance, Jeff jumps up in defense of Phil's masturbation doctrine, referring to it as one of the harder doctrines that the less spiritual don't understand. So just with that background, understand that that's who you're talking to.
Wow. So, well, he called me and was asking about that, and he's like, "Okay, I didn't know." He said, "I knew you said you made a comment about doing this work full time," and I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "But no," I said, I that's what I'm doing." He says, "Well, I just didn't know if you were trying to follow what Dustin Smith was doing." And in my mind, I'm thinking, why does this matter? Like, Dustin's doing a very honorable thing. Like, that's no easy task in my mind, to give up everything to follow Christ. Like, that's pretty amazing to me. It must be hard, but it's an amazing thing, and it must have amazing faith behind that. And he's like, well, he says, I'm just thinking how sinful it kind of is. It's not what Christ has called us to do. We have to work. And I was like, well, I understand we live in a modern society and money makes the world go round, which makes what he's doing 10 times more honorable. So you're kind of defending, in my mind, you're defending his honor in a way of, we live in a harder world than 2,000 years ago, and he's giving it all up. But yeah, the whole conversation really just threw me off. The fact that you would speak to me about your brother and what God's called him to do, why you feel like you have a place in the middle of that when God has clearly called him to do something. If there's more he calls to do that, then they are doing it. I would hope they would do that, but Dustin's a man that he called to do that. And I feel like it's a very honorable thing to give up modern life in 2021, 2020, when he might have done that 3 or 4 years ago, to go and follow Christ and follow the Father and to listen, only to be attacked and have this character assassination later by men who are supposed to love him. And so yeah, that's watching that video and of yours interviewing him and going through the whole video step by step. I think I watched it 2 or 3 times in a row. I was like, dude, I just didn't want to miss anything because I wanted to make sure, see what was going on. Because I knew there had to be good people left. I mean, I had 2 guys drive all the way here from Georgia to come baptize me who were a part of that school.
Yeah.
So to me, I was like, there's a lot of honorable men, a lot of very good men, faithful, godly men in this group. And then there's this completely wicked side. And it's just crazy how those universes collided when they did. But
yeah,
I can see why that dream took place. And I told Father, I was like, I should have said something sooner. I should have taken that dream, and maybe this is something I need to learn. I was like, but I should have taken that dream and did what, you had your prophets of old do. And not that I'm a prophet, but they went and warned people of things. And I was like, maybe I should have said something, whether it was received well or not. I should have said something.
Did you get an answer when you presented that to your Heavenly Father? Like, yes, you should have, or that you were appropriate in just knowing it for yourself?
No, he definitely told me, like, after praying about it. And I definitely, he told me you should have said something. That's why I gave it to you.
Yeah. It sounds like he's patient in your learning curve.
Yeah.
He's got to be patient in mind.
I always apologize to him too. I'm like, Father, I'm sorry. I if I tend to walk around like a human man and thinking I'm just the smartest guy ever, I'm sorry, because I'm actually a fool and I'm stupid compared to you. But I am willing to learn, and I'm willing to follow you anywhere, whether I'm stupid or if I am smart. So I was like, I'll follow you anywhere. And whatever you choose to do in my life is what I have to do. And you've brought me so far that I know now through dreams and all these happenings that we're close. We're very close. I know certain things to be looking for now, and I know that there's a few people left after this separation, and that there's going to be beautiful things happening around the world. That's coming.
Yeah.
Such as my dream with like this whole Exodus thing. Like that was not what I thought it was either. I thought it was just one massive Exodus, and turns out it's like everybody has an Exodus. People are going to be coming from all over the world. So it's like when I prayed about it, it just, because before, when I'd heard about stuff like that, I'm like, why would everyone at this last moment in life, I guess everyone in the world is going to fly to Utah and then they're going to go from Utah to wherever and
to the New Jerusalem.
Yeah. So to me, it just didn't make sense. So I prayed about it. I was like, why would I'm in Kentucky, like Missouri's right there.
Hop, skip, and jump.
Yeah, it's like I'm like 2.5 hours from it. Why would I drive through it to go to Utah to walk all the way back? So I started praying about it, and in that dream there, God showed me, it's like there's going to be people coming from all over. There'll be people coming from England, taking a plane, having their own Exodus. Maybe like, in my dream, I saw a husband and a wife and 2 children hop on a plane and came here. They went through this Exodus, and they were bringing people along the way. They were telling people along the way about what was going on with this and sharing their faith. And some people weren't like, no, that's crazy. And then there were other groups that were forming, and they were getting bigger as they go, that there were many, many Exoduses, and everybody was, instead of like everybody was going to this one spot and marching to this spot, and then we're going to send a bunch of people out to get these people. They were bringing them along the way. And
what you're describing is in the Doctrine and Covenants and in the Book of Mormon, and even in the Old Testament, the strange work that the Lord's going to do. The other wording that's used in the scriptures is the great and marvelous work. There has been the false tradition to where, it started with Joseph and carried on through Brigham and on then. No, it started with Joseph. The foundation was laid. An amazing awareness and spreading of the Book of Mormon has happened. But when the Lord does his work and sends out servants the way that it's described in Doctrine and Covenants section 1, it will be unmistakable.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how this was too. In this dream, it was like, it's like people knew where everybody was going, but some people chose to follow and others didn't. So, I mean, it's been an amazing journey up to here. And as I was talking to Dustin last night, I was like, the crazy part is there's so much more to come.
Yes.
There's so much more to come. I said, it's only going to get more interesting from here.
See, there's the dream that I had that I shared in the podcast on dreams. It was a great procession in the sky, and the dream ended with ships landing at the base of a giant mountain. And it was obviously like, even though that was this amazing procession in my dream, the dream ends with, okay, now the real journey begins, because we were at the base of the mountain. We could see the trail, and it looked like it was kind of single file width of trail. And at the very base where that started, there was an unfinished statue of both Joseph and Hyrum.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Well, I've even speculated, because I had a dream, and I've still yet to receive an answer on this one. This was the last dream I had, the very last dream I had. But there was a clock, and I told Dustin Smith about it already. This was about a month or two back when I told him about it. But in my dream, I saw this giant clock, and it was just ticking. And I asked him the dream. I was like, Father, what does this represent? And he says, this is how much time is left. And so I didn't look at it as like, oh, it's 3 o'clock, we got till midnight, but as in what the clock represented, that the time was counting down.
Okay.
And I was like, well, is there any signs that you can show me, things to be watchful for? And it wasn't like before, because I felt more mature now than I did a year ago. But the answer was yes. And he showed me the river Euphrates. So I was like, okay.
Did it dry up? What happened?
It looked really, 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 really dry. And I saw 4 creatures coming out of it. Of course, that's biblical. But I did see 4 creatures coming out of it. And so I asked him, I was like, so is this what I'm looking for? Well, he showed me 2 men, and I knew instantly by seeing them in the dream that it was the 2 witnesses. But I could never see their faces. But I had, and it's so weird, because in the dream, I felt this brotherly love coming from them both. And it really, like, I'm still praying on this one, and I'll update you. But a part of me really, really thinks this is Joseph and Hiram. Mm-hmm. I feel like, and I've stated this to my wife, I'm okay with the fact that people believe it's like Moses and Elijah, or Enoch and who was it, Elijah? Because I guess they never tasted death, I think it was. Yeah. But
well, because I don't think that we're meant to get hung up on the specifics, because we're aware that we are fallible in our interpretation of messages that come from God.
Yeah.
God's infallible. Our interpretation can be wrong. We don't get hung up on it. But yeah, in other words, there's a lot of things that would point to that being a very reasonable explanation.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I felt. It just was like, to me, I got to thinking to myself, and even to this very day, I'm still praying about it. I'm like, Father, the scripture says that the world's going to hate these men. If you see something, and they're going to kill them, they're going to lay dead in the streets for 3 days. I feel like with the world being majority Christianity, and even certain other religions who believe in Elijah, if a spiritual person comes back claiming to be Elijah and Enoch, or Elijah and Moses, why would anybody in Christianity kill him? I was like, who else would you want to kill than Joseph and Hiram?
Yeah.
I mean, the early Latter-day Saints, in my opinion, killed him.
Yeah.
Killed both of them. So, oh man, they really hate him today. So that's just kind of the impression I have. But that's my latest dream with that. Was it just, I don't know, I'm not looking for a day, an hour, just, asking Father to bless me to know when things start to happen, that I can be aware so that I'm not deceived. And that's my biggest fear. And I was just telling Dustin that last night. I was like, my greatest fear in life is deception.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be that guy in that day that gets told, depart from me, for I never knew you.
Now, you've been awesome. Like throughout all of this, it's been filled with testimony throughout. But I feel like it's an appropriate time to start to put the landing gear down. Can you kind of share where you are in your walk with the Savior, and what it is you feel is your duty to prepare and help others prepare for?
My walk is firm. It's firm. I've got both feet planted on the ground. Sometimes I feel like it's a burden to carry all of it, because I feel like everybody should know this so very simple, loving doctrine. Where to go? I start preparing in my own house, because there are a few things I agree with. I feel like a man should have his house in order. So there's stuff I learned from certain individuals that I'm like, okay, there's a lot of truth behind this, I believe, but it's definitely I believe getting your house in order. and teaching as many people as possible about it. Like, I'm in Kentucky. We're not like Utah. We don't have LDS people on every corner here. And I've shared this with normal Christian people who don't even know the Book of Mormon, but when they hear it this way, they're more acceptable to it.
Yeah.
Somebody's like, I would believe it in that. Like, actually, they're like, why don't LDS people teach it that way? I was like, well, because it's not a typical LDS teaching the way they're going to teach it to you, the way these things happen. But they're like, well, it makes Joseph seem more like a prophet and less like a polygamist that we hear about from them. And I was like, well, just simple research and simple prayer, So I've been telling a lot of just evangelical Christians about this, and most of them have been more acceptable to the Book of Mormon than it was when I was telling them as a LDS member. So that's the fight I go through, is just talking to evangelical Christians who not only would have a hard time dealing with what we know now, but I have to get them past that Book of Mormon part too. So it's a little rough, but
good.
That's kind of where I'm going with it. And I'm just, I'm preparing in ways to be watchful and to spread this as much as I possibly can with anybody who's willing to hear.
Your love of the Savior shines through, Eric. Anything else take a quick moment to prayerfully take inventory? Anything else you feel that you should share before we bring this conversation to a close?
I mean, nothing I can think of. I feel like I've covered quite a bit.
I do suspect that you and I will likely do another conversation, maybe about dreams sometime, and learning how to interpret them, and maybe even share something that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Eric, thank you so much for joining the Disciple of Christ podcast.
Thank you.